West Virginia, you know what I hear? I hear a fear that the technology revolution and globalization is leaving people behind. Folks talk about the brain drain, about a fear that they're going to have to buy their kids a one-way ticket out of their cities, out of their communities. Bernie Sanders believes that every person should be able to work and earn a decent living in the city where they grew up. That no one in this country should be forced to move away from the city they love to pursue the American dream. We need universal broadband in every corner of America. You could do that with the amount it costs us for 1 year in Afghanistan. We need to bring the new jobs and technology jobs here to Sioux City and all across America because we don't have a community or a person to waste, and there's no reason that those jobs should be done in Brazil or India or China and can't be done in the heartland of this country. Let me end with this before introducing our next president and our co-chair, Ben Cohen, who will introduce our next president. President Trump recently called President Carter a couple of weeks ago. I have great admiration for President Carter. When I was a college student, I interned at the Carter Center. And President Trump, President Carter is such a class act. He doesn't, disparage anyone. And so President Trump called him and he said, "I'm concerned about China." And you know what President Carter said? President Carter said, "If you're concerned about China, look at what they're doing. They haven't been in a war since 1979. We have been at peace only in 16 years of our history. We made blunder after blunder in Iraq, and then in Syria, and then in Libya, and now they're thinking of Venezuela, spending trillions of your dollars on overseas wars. While China is investing in high-speed rail, they're investing in broadband, they're building universities, they're investing in their rural communities. It's time we had a leader like Bernie Sanders who's going to stop the wars and start investing in our people. It's time we had a leader who's not going to divide us, urban and rural, but who's going to stitch the fabric of this country back together, who's going to lead with integrity, and who is going to prepare this nation, every part of this nation, to lead in the 21st century. I believe there is only one person in this country who is up to that task. That person is Senator Bernie Sanders. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage National Campaign Co-Chair and Co-Founder of Ben & Jerry's, Ben Cohen.
Hello, Sioux City. Before Bernie, I used to be the most famous guy from Vermont. So it is with great pride that I give up that mantle to Bernie. Ice cream is good, but a president of the United States who truly believes in justice in all its flavors, that is euphoric. Euphoria is a high-minded word, but the reason why Bernie will be able to transform Washington is that he's down to earth. He's got a vision, and it's pretty basic. What would our country be like if it was really structured to improve the quality of life for regular, everyday people instead of more profits for corporations? He has no delusions. He knows what he's up against. He's been in the trenches. He's been in Washington for 30 years. And he knows what the cesspool of our political life is there. And that will enable him to finally flush the crap down the drain. I don't see Bernie as a politician in the usual sense of the word. What he is a fighter for justice, social, racial, and economic. And he uses politics as a means to that end. Before Bernie, I never had a mayor that represented my values. I never had a congressman that represented my values, or a senator. And I just can't tell you how good it feels to have somebody who represents you, who really represents you. So I just want to give you a taste of what's gotten me so excited about seeing this guy in the White House. For the last 40 years, I've been Bernie's constituent. I've seen how steadfast and determined and focused he is. For these last 4 decades, he's worked consistently to improve life for regular, everyday people and those who are oppressed. Back in 1980, when Ben & Jerry's was just starting out, Bernie won an improbable victory over a long-term, old crony Democratic Party machine incumbent, and he became mayor of Burlington by winning by 10 votes on election night. His first act was to shut down plans for expensive condominiums that would have privatized the shore of Lake Champlain. And he beat those developers, and instead, he created a public park that's open to everybody. When he became my congressman, he personally took busloads of senior citizens over the border into Canada so they could buy their prescription drugs at decent prices. And he was even leading then, because then lots of Congress people started doing the same thing. Then he co-founded the Progressive Caucus, which has now become the biggest values-based caucus in the House. He voted against NAFTA before voting against NAFTA was cool. He voted twice against going to war in Iraq. Then, in 2007, he defeated the richest man in Vermont and became my senator. As senator, he worked with conservatives to force the first ever audit of the Federal Reserve after the financial crash. It revealed $16 trillion in near zero interest loans to Wall Street banks and numerous conflicts of interest. Then he led a successful effort to stop the so-called chain CPI, which would have lowered Social Security benefits and benefits for disabled veterans. And last September, Bernie introduced the Stop Bezos Act. That stands for Stop Bad Employers by Zeroing Out Subsidies. What it does is it requires large corporations that are paying lousy wages to reimburse the federal government for the benefits that their employees need, Medicaid and Medicaid and food stamps, in order to get by because their pay is so lousy. A month later, Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. And now in the news over the past month, you've been reading about this resolution to get the U.S. out of the war in Yemen. It is Bernie who led that effort and brought Republicans and Democrats together. When Bernie ran for president the first time, and he said he wouldn't take any big money donations, I thought it was a mistake. I thought that he would never raise enough money to run a viable campaign. And then I came to understand it. he knew that if he couldn't generate an army of people that were willing to give him small donations, that he didn't want to be president. Because then once he became president, he wouldn't have the army of people that he needs to get the legislation passed and transform Washington. So, what do I think about Bernie, the man? Well, he's always been the same, really consistent. He never wavers. He has a clear vision for how to make America kind again. He's not a fancy guy. He's pretty down home, no airs. And I like his hairstyle. That never changes either. He doesn't go with the trends, he sets the trends. Look at all the other candidates that are now talking about small donor-funded campaigns, universal health care, publicly funded colleges and universities. Bernie, the trendsetter? Who knew? But he's already leading the country. And now it is my incredible pleasure and honor to introduce to you the first, the only, the authentic next President of the United States, Senator Bernie Sanders!
Thank you, Sioux City, and welcome to the political revolution. Let me thank Ultraviolet Fever. Sounds like they were good. Let me thank Michael Fasulo, who is trying to engage you in the campaign. Let me thank Nick Massoon, Jessica Butler, and Zachary Crisell for their kind words. And let me say a word about Congressman Ro Khanna, who is one of our co-chairs. Ro and I have been working together on a very, very important project of historical significance. And that is, as some of you may know, in the last few months in the Senate, where I helped lead the effort, and in the House, where Ro helped lead the effort, for the first time in 45 years, the United States Congress utilized the War Powers Act to end a war we should not be in, and that's the terrible war in Yemen. Now, unfortunately, although not surprisingly, Trump vetoed that legislation. We were not able to overturn it. But the course is clear, and that is that the United States Congress will not and must not abdicate its constitutional responsibility over determining whether or not our country goes to war. We're not going to give that to this president or any other president. And tonight, I want to welcome all of you in Sioux City for being here as part of a campaign which is not only going to win the Democratic nomination, which is not only, after we win the nomination, going to defeat the most dangerous president in modern American history, but with your help, we're going to create a government and an economy that works for all of us and not just the 1%. And our campaign says loudly and proudly that the underlying principles of our government will not be greed, will not be Kleptocracy will not be hatred or lies. It will not be racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, and religious bigotry. That is precisely what the Trump administration is all about, and together we are going to end that. The principles of our government will be based on the principles of justice: economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. And tonight, I want to welcome you to a campaign which tells the powerful special interests in our country that we will no longer tolerate the greed, a greed which is destroying the fabric of this country, the greed of Wall Street, corporate America, and the billionaire class, greed which has resulted in this country having more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, and it is worse today, if you can believe it, than at any time since the 1920s. We will not accept in America 3 families owning more wealth than the bottom half of our country. 3 families owning more wealth than the bottom 160 million Americans. We will not accept the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 92%. And at a time when people in Iowa and Vermont are working 2 or 3 jobs to keep their families alive, we will not accept that 49% of all new income is going to the top 1%. In America today, we will not accept the reality, unless we turn it around, of our younger generation, for the first time in modern American history, having a lower standard of living than their parents. And today, we announce loudly and clearly that we are going to create a political system in this country which is based on the principles of one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. And that means not only together are we going to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, but we are going to move toward public funding of elections. And we are going to end the outrageous kinds of voter suppression that Republican governors are pushing all across this country. I was in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, and the legislature there and their governor has passed legislation to make it harder for young people to vote. In Tennessee, their government has passed legislation to make it harder for people to engage in voter registration drives. In Georgia and in other states, they are making it harder for people of color and poor people to vote. So as I have said many, many times, if those cowardly Republican governors cannot participate in free, fair, and open elections, they should get the heck out of politics and get a new job. What we believe in is making it easier for people to vote, not harder. What we believe in is if you are 18 years of age and an American citizen, you have the right to vote. End of discussion. And tonight I want to offer a very special thanks to the people of Iowa. In 2016, this is where the political revolution began. Thank you, Iowa. As some of you will recall, when I first came to Iowa 4 years ago, we had, according to the polls, about 3 or 4% support. Most people did not know who the junior senator from Vermont was. And there were relatively few people in the media or the political establishment that took our campaign seriously. Further, and even more importantly, the ideas that we were then talking about were seen by the political establishment and the media establishment as ideas that were extreme, ideas that were radical, ideas, they said, that were way out of touch with where the American people were. Raising the minimum wage to a living wage. Oh, much too radical an idea. Listen to this one. Guaranteeing health care to all people as a right. No, nobody in America supports that one. Creating up to 15 million jobs by investing $1 trillion to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Oh, no, no, no. Nobody will support that idea. Expanding Social Security benefits rather than cutting Social Security. Oh, Bernie, don't you know we got to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid? What are you talking about? I was on a nationally televised debate, and the moderator asked the candidates what did they think the major national security threat to the United States was. And they expected people to say ISIS or Al-Qaeda, who are very serious threats. And I answered by saying the most serious national threat to our country is climate change. At which point, the moderator laughed. They are not laughing today. Well, years ago, we talked about the absurdity of having a situation of massive income and wealth inequality and demanding that the wealthiest people in this country and large profitable corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. Four years ago, we talked about reforming our broken criminal justice system and our broken immigration systems. Too radical. 4 years ago, as Ben Cohn mentioned to you, I said, you know, maybe we should do politics a little bit differently than others have done over the years. Maybe we should not simply hustle money from the wealthiest people in this country. Maybe we should not have a super PAC. Maybe we should go directly to the working families of this country for campaign contributions. And people said, that sounds nice, but that is not a workable idea. 4 years ago, we said maybe there is something wrong in the Democratic Party rules when before the very first vote was cast here in Iowa, my opponent had already secured 500 super delegate votes. Well, funny thing happened. That is no longer the case. The DNC has changed the rules. So here is my point. I want to thank the people of Iowa for allowing me to come into your state as a political unknown and leaving the state with 50% of the delegates. Because of what you did here in Iowa, we were able to go to New Hampshire and win a good victory there, and we ended up winning 22 states in the country, 13 million votes, and over 1,700 delegates to the Democratic National Convention. And most importantly, we ended up winning more votes from young people than Clinton and Trump combined. And by the way, those ideas that we talked about 4 years ago that seemed so very radical at the time, well, today, virtually all of those ideas are supported by a majority of the American people, and they are supported by Democratic candidates from dog catcher to President of the United States. So Iowa, what you did is help begin the political revolution in 2016, and with your help on this campaign, we are going to complete what we began right here. So you told the American people that these ideas were not radical, they were not extreme, they were ideas that the American people supported. So tonight, as we go forward, let me tell the private insurance companies that whether they like it or not, and trust me, they do not like it, this country will join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a right, not a privilege. We will end the absurdity of having the United States spend twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other nation, and yet see our health care outcomes worse than many other countries. Yes, we will pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. And by the way, just so that you know this, the insurance companies and the drug companies are becoming very nervous about our momentum. That's right, it is good. When they get worried, we know we are doing something right. And what they are doing right now is coming together in a coalition of drug companies and insurance companies and other parts of the healthcare industry. And my guess is they will spend tens and tens of millions of dollars on dishonest TV ads and other advertising trying to defeat us. But I think the American people are clear that when we have 34 million people uninsured, even more underinsured, when 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the outrageously high prices of prescription drugs, when we have a Medicare program today for seniors, which is a good program and a popular program, the American people understand that now is the time to expand Medicare to every man, woman, and child in this country. And today we say to all of the low-wage employers in this country, from Walmart to the fast food industry, stop paying your employees starvation wages. $4 years ago, when we talked about $15 an hour as a minimum wage, it seemed like a radical idea. I am happy to tell you that since that time, 6 states have passed that legislation, and the United States House of Representatives, within a month or two, will also pass that legislation. Four years ago, we said that, in a competitive global economy, we should and must have the best educated workforce in the world. We used to have that. We no longer do. And what we said 4 years ago is that we must make public colleges and universities tuition free. And I'm happy to tell you that we're seeing movement in that direction in states and communities all over this country who understand that if young people are going to make it into the middle class, they need a higher education, either college or the training that they need for many of the good types of jobs that are out there. And 4 years ago, we said that it is basically insane, and I use that word advisedly, that we have tens of millions of Americans who are struggling with outrageous levels of debt for the crime of getting a higher education. We want the American people to get all of the education they need, because education is not only a human right, you need a good education today to get decent paying jobs, and people should not have to pay off their debts decade after decade. And that's why we have introduced a major piece of legislation that will not only make public colleges and universities tuition free, but very substantially lower student debt in America. And today, we say to Donald Trump and the fossil fuel industry that climate change is not a hoax, but it is an existential threat to our country and to the entire planet. And today we say to the fossil fuel industry, we are sick and tired of you putting your short-term profits ahead of the survival of this planet. So what we are going to do is take on the fossil fuel industry. What we are going to do is lead the world, because this is not an American issue, this is a global issue. We are going to bring countries around the world together, Russia and China and India and Latin America and Africa, countries around the world, to stand together and transform our energy system away from fossil fuels into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Brothers and sisters, this is not an issue that we can equivocate about. This is a profound moral issue. And that means that as human beings, as inhabitants of this planet, we have a moral responsibility to leave this planet to our kids, grandchildren, and future generations in a way that is healthy and habitable, and together we will do just that. And today we say to the prison industrial complex, whether you like it or not, we are going to bring about real criminal justice reform in this country. This is America, and we should not be having more people in jail, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American, more people in jail than any other country on earth. We are spending $80 billion a year at the local, state, and federal level to lock up fellow Americans. That ain't right. So what we are going to do is to invest in jobs and education for our young people, not more jails and more incarceration. And that means that we are going to end private prisons and detention centers. It means that we are going to end the so-called war on drugs, which has destroyed so many lives. And I want to tell you again, and I'm going to make this point over and over again, that when people stand up and fight back, progress can be made. 4 years ago, when we talked about ending the war on drugs, when we talked about decriminalizing marijuana and legalizing marijuana, that was seen then as a far-out radical idea. Well, guess what? Ain't so radical today. State after state is moving in that direction. And in fact, we're seeing communities now expunging the records of people who are arrested for possession of marijuana. And let me also tell you something, which I did not talk about 4 years ago, I should have. And that is that right now, and many people don't know this, we have 400,000 people in jail. That's about 20% of people behind bars who are in jail for the crime of being poor and not being able to afford cash bail. And that certainly ain't right. So we're going to end that practice. This is the year 2019. We should not be back in the Charles Dickens era of debtor prisons. And tonight we say to the American people that instead of demonizing the undocumented immigrants in this country, which is what Trump does every day, we are going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. We are going to provide legal status to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And we are going to develop a humane and compassionate border policy for those who seek asylum. America is not about and must never be about snatching babies from the arms of their mothers. Anybody here know how much in federal income taxes Amazon paid last year? All right, got a smart group of people here. So today, we say to Amazon, owned by the wealthiest person in America, we say to Amazon and the dozens of other very profitable corporations who did not pay a nickel in federal income taxes under a Bernie Sanders administration, those days are over. Together, we are going to end the massive tax breaks and loopholes that large profitable corporations now enjoy. Today, we say to the military-industrial complex that we do not need to spend more on the military than the next 10 nations combined. We are going to invest in affordable housing. We're going to invest in public education. We're going to invest in rebuilding our infrastructure, but we are not going to invest in never-ending wars. Now, we are going to win the Democratic primary, and we're going to defeat Trump because we are going to do exactly the opposite of what Trump does. What Donald Trump does for cheap political gain is try to divide our people up, to get one group of people to hate another group of people. And I must say, Trump is not smart enough to have invented that strategy himself. That's what demagogues always do. That's what they do. So in this country, what he is trying to do is to divide us up based on the color of our skin. You remember Trump was one of the founders and leaders of the so-called birther movement, attacking the legitimacy of the first African-American president in our history. And Trump is trying to divide us up based on our country of origin, where we were born. He's trying to divide us up based on our religion or our sexual orientation. And our strategy is to do exactly the opposite. We are going to bring our people together, black and white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, young and old, men and women, native born and immigrant. And what I am very proud to tell you is that our campaign has already enlisted more than 1 million volunteers in every congressional district in America to help us win the political revolution. And here in Iowa, let me tell you that as someone who represents the state of Vermont in the U.S. Senate, which is one of the most rural states in America, let me be very honest with you in saying that the United States Congress, Republicans and Democrats, have for too long ignored the many crises facing rural America. And that has got to change. In Iowa, in Vermont, and all over this country, we have seen more and more young people leave the small towns they grew up in and love, not because they don't want to stay, but because there are fewer and fewer jobs that pay them a living wage. In Iowa and in Vermont and all across this country, we have seen schools and churches and community centers shut down, and once vibrant main streets become boarded up and deserted. All across rural America, we have seen family farmers go out of business as the prices they receive for their products decline rapidly, and large agribusiness corporations and factory farming take over agriculture. We have seen rural hospitals and nursing homes shut down and not enough doctors to provide the quality health care that rural America deserves. Tragically, instead of seeing good-paying jobs, education, and health care coming to our rural communities, we are far too often seeing despair, depression, and people losing hope. And with that, we have seen a terrible increase in drug addiction, in alcoholism, and even in suicide. Unbelievably, in America, and this is an issue we do not talk enough about, for the third straight year in America, we have actually seen a decline in life expectancy. Brothers and sisters, we need policies for rural America that represent the needs of working people and family farmers, not agribusiness and multinational corporations. And among many other things that need to be done is for the federal government to finally start enforcing antitrust legislation. And I will appoint an attorney general who will do just that. It is not acceptable to me or to you that the top 4 packing companies control more than 80% of the beef market, 63% of the pork market, and 53% of the chicken market. Let me give you one example of what all of that means. Independent pork producers here in Iowa have been put out of business, and slaughterhouse workers have seen their wages remain flat for 30 years. Meanwhile, the CEO of Smithfield's parent company was given a $291 million pay package last year. With the federal government not enforcing antitrust laws, we have seen mergers like the Bayer-Monsanto approved merger, giving these 2 large conglomerates 78% of the corn seed market. While this deal could end up further jacking up seed prices for Iowa corn farmers, the CEO of Monsanto was rewarded for engineering the deal with a golden parachute worth up to $32 million. So what you see is the executives at all of these large agribusiness conglomerates making huge amounts of money at the same time as family farmers in Iowa, in Vermont, and all over rural America are driven from the land. And together, we are going to stop that. Together, we are going to focus on the needs of rural America and invest in rural America and rebuild rural America. I think many of you know that the message of our campaign is not me, us. And while that may seem like a catchy slogan for a bumper sticker, and it probably will end up on a bumper sticker, it is actually a very, very important point, and it has everything to do with what this campaign is about. So I'm going to tell you something that I do not believe that any other candidate is going to tell you. And that is that no president, not the most honest, not the most intelligent, not the most dedicated, can do it alone. Because the special interests in this country are so powerful that they will swat away any initiative coming from the White House. What this means is that what we have got to do is not only win this election, and I need your help to do that, but I need your help to do something even more. I know I'm asking a lot of you, and that is, I need your help after the inauguration to help us build a massive grassroots movement which has the power to stand up to Wall Street, to stand up to the insurance companies, to stand up to the drug companies, to stand up to the fossil fuel industry, to stand up to the military-industrial complex, to stand up to all of these greedy special interests who want it all. And everyone here who has studied American history understands that the real changes, significant changes that we have seen in our country's history never, ever emanate from the top on down. It's never someday some president wakes up and says, hey, I have a great idea. Workers should be able to join unions. That's not how it happens. The only way that real change ever takes place is when millions of people stand up and fight back. Think about the labor movement 150 years ago. Workers were treated like garbage. They were treated like animals. They had no rights. They could be worked 10, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if they protested, they could be fired by the employer. Think about the children who worked in factories rather than being in school. Think about the children who worked in farms and on plantations. And what working people said 100, 150 years ago, we are sick and tired of that. We are going to come together, we're going to form unions, and we are going to fight for our rights. We need dignity. Think for a moment about the struggle of women in this country. 100 years ago today, women did not even have the right to vote. Women were unable to get the education they desired. Women were not able to do the work they wanted, and if there was a divorce, women were treated extremely unfairly. In other words, they had no power. And what happened is all across this country, women stood up along with their male allies, and they said that in America, we will not be second-class citizens. They stood up and they fought back and they won victory after victory. And in terms of women's rights, let me say this. No question, real progress has been made. 20, 25 years ago, there was one woman in the United States Senate. So we have made real progress. But as we speak right now, there is a massive assault on a woman's right to choose. And we say today that we are sick and tired of Republican politicians telling us that they believe in small government, that they believe we should get government out of the lives of the American people. Well, if you believe that you should get government out of the lives of American people, then get government out of the business of controlling what a woman can do with her body. But it's not only workers who have stood up and fought back, not only women. The civil rights movement was not about just Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the great leaders in American history, and he would tell you that there is nothing that he could accomplish unless millions of people work together to end segregation and to demand that all people in this country, regardless of the color of their skin, had the right to vote. And think about the struggles of our gay brothers and sisters. Think about the fact that 25, 30 years ago, people were embarrassed to acknowledge their sexual orientation. But incredibly brave people stood up, and they were humiliated, and they were beaten, and they were harassed, but they stood up in a determined way and said, we have the right to love whomever we want, regardless of gender. And the result of that, and now you take it for granted, but trust me, it did not happen without a lot of struggle, that we have now gay marriage and have made real progress in that area. So, let me just conclude by telling you what this campaign is all about. It's not just about winning the primary. It's not just about winning the general election. It is about millions of people having the courage to stand up to the very powerful special interests who control the economic and political life of this country. And I'm asking a lot of you, I know that. It'd be easier for me to say to you, hey, vote for me, and I'm going to do it all. But I'm trying to be honest with you. I am asking if you vote, but I'm telling you I can't do it alone. And that's what the political revolution is about. It is about thinking big, not small. It is about asking how come in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, millions of working families cannot find quality and affordable child care. It's about asking why it is necessary for teachers all across this country, most recently in South Carolina and North Carolina, having to go out on the streets to fight for the right of their kids to get a decent education. It is about saying that in our country, if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty, and half of the people in this country should not be forced to exist under incredible stress because they are living paycheck to paycheck. Do you know what that means, living paycheck to paycheck? I know what that means because I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. And we talk about why life expectancy is in decline. That has a lot to do with it. People are living under incredible stress. They're worried that if their car breaks down and they need a $500 repair, they don't have that $500. And if your car breaks down, you can't get to work. And if you can't get to work, you're going to get fired. And if you get fired, you're not going to have enough money to take care of your kids or pay the rent. Living paycheck to paycheck means that you are scared to death that your kid or your husband or your wife is going to get sick, and you don't have any health insurance, and you can't afford the $200 that you need to go to the doctor. And living paycheck to paycheck means that, God forbid, if somebody ends up in the hospital and you got a $50,000 bill, your family credit will be destroyed forever. This is the United States of America. We should not be giving tax breaks to billionaires and have veterans sleeping out on the street. This is the United States of America. We should not be the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. This is the United States of America. We should not be paying twice as much for prescription drugs as do the people of other countries. So, brothers and sisters, We are at an unprecedented and momentous moment in American history. We have an incredibly dangerous president who must be defeated, but we also have an enormous struggle in front of us to create the kind of world and the kind of justice that is needed for all of our people. So tonight, I'm here in Iowa, here in Sioux City, to ask for your support in the Democratic caucus, to ask for your support in defeating Donald Trump. But to also ask for your support to stand with me to transform this country so that we have a government and we have an economy that works for all of us, not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors. Sioux City, thank you so much.